It's always fun. It doesn't matter if you're healthy or unhealthy, but that entrance into a relationship is really exciting. Or maybe for some unhealthy people, it just appears that way. Like, for example, really, really violent, toxic kind of relationships. With natural law, you naturally want to go through that entryway, but you don't want to. Yeah? So you're doing your best. You put your hands and your feet and the tips of your toes and the tips of your fingers are clinging on to that doorway as natural law is trying to pull you through, but you're fighting against it. You're hanging on for dear life to that entrance. You don't want to go through. You want that good feeling to last forever. That's the doorway. And with the relationship, healthy people walk through it. And it goes into another dimension because it's like a house, yeah? Once you go through the doorway, it's like an extension of everything. And so there's more opportunities. It's going to include all emotions. It's going to include difficulties too. If you're healthy, you're okay with that, yeah? Because when you are healthy by yourself, just you look at yourself. You're a healthy person. You're trying to live a healthy life, and you've learned that when tough times come, that it's best not to fight against it, but to learn from it and make the best of the situation, regardless of how difficult it is. You do your best to do that. And once you start doing that, you feel better. You start to come to peace with it. You gain knowledge. You gain wisdom. And you are nurturing peace inside of you. These are all blessings. You know that. That's what you've learned when you're a healthy person. So you know that a relationship is going to have that too. This is the way nature is. So when people are healthy and they go through that doorway, they enjoy it. They enjoy each other immensely as they pass through the doorway. And both of them know. Like attracts like. So when you're healthy, most likely you will attract somebody healthy too. So both of you know this, and you walk through that doorway, and you both know that there's all kinds of experiences to be had in this house called a relationship. So you both know that sometimes it's going to be really nice, sometimes it's going to be just peaceful and content and calm, but sometimes there'll be difficulty too. You know this because you experience it within your own life. So when the difficulty comes, neither of you are afraid of it. It might shock you, like if it's a out of the blue kind of surprise, those unexpected kind of surprises that are not so nice. That happens. And so you know that, but it takes you by surprise, and then you say, okay, take a deep breath and start connecting your mind to your heart. Really make sure that connection is there. Because when you're healthy, you are communicating with both your mind and your heart. So when these out-of-the-blue kind of difficulties come, you just make sure that connection is there. Yeah, and then you start dealing with it. You might have to get mad. You might have to get scared. It might be sad. So you let those emotions come out. And both of you know that what you're doing is you're just releasing the emotion. That's all. Both of you know that. So words might come out that might seem inappropriate, but when you're healthy, you realize that that's just part of releasing the emotion, because both of you will come back to your senses and, okay, I'm sorry I said that, but I'm just releasing the emotion, and I love you very much, and I would like to face this difficulty with you. So what are your thoughts on this? And I'll tell you my thoughts. You want me to tell my thoughts first or whatever? Something like that. And then you start discussing it and finding a solution for it. And it might not come fast, but it will come as long as both of you work on it. So from that, your love for each other will increase. Do you see? That's what I meant when I said earlier, healthy people walk through that doorway that is just total utter joy into the house because they know that there's going to be opportunities to learn through difficulty, appreciation, that they will learn and that their love will increase. They know that because that's what happened to them individually as they live their lives. So they know that in their relationship, the same thing is going to happen. And both people know that the most important moment is the present moment. So you stay there. You do what you have to do to stay in the present moment. It's okay to think of the future. You should be at peace with your past. But you stay mostly in the present moment because that influences your future. And staying in the present moment helps you to come to peace with your past that bothers you. So both healthy people know this in this relationship that I'm talking about. So they know that a relationship could also increase their love for each other, for themselves, for others. They know this. So they gladly walk through that doorway of this relationship. But unhealthy people, it's not that way. They don't know. And maybe they have a clue, but they're scared of it. They don't want to fight. They don't want to feel sad. They don't want to feel angry. They always want to be on their best behavior all the time. And so they end up putting on an act to try to keep the other one and stay in the doorway, just barely clinging on with their fingertips and tips of their toes. They're barely clinging on to that doorway, trying not to go through, because natural law is going to pull you through. That's how life is. So that's why it's important to be healthy. So when you go through willingly, you're actually going into another dimension of your life to increase your love. So you don't lose your identity. When you're healthy, you don't lose your individual identity. The relationship becomes an extension or another dimension of your identity, and for your partner as well. But in an unhealthy relationship, both of them are incomplete. So they're seeking someone else to complete them. And like I said, once they find somebody, they're always acting on their best behavior because they don't want to lose them. They don't want to make the other one angry so that other one leaves. They don't want the other one to be sad. They don't want the other one to be scared. They want themselves and each other to always, always, always be happy. And they do what they have to do to maintain that feeling, to stay in that doorway, barely clinging on. This is what they think is love. This is their idea of love. This is what they've become addicted to. Some people call this love addiction. It's unhealthy living. And a lot of times, this is learned behavior. Because lots of times we grow up in homes, and even though we may have both mother and father there, we may not receive proper parenting. So we're lacking certain experiences that could have given us emotional well-being. And because we're lacking that, we are diseased in a way. Yeah, we have an illness. We are emotionally ill because we're not emotionally developed. So we don't know this though. We just think that, oh, so this is what love is from what you learn in your home environment. So like I said, sometimes that might mean that because of improper parenting, that formed your idea of what love is. But it's based on lack of experiences that you should have to be emotionally well. So you're lacking, but you don't know it. All you know is what you experienced at home. And maybe you see your mother and father having difficulty, and you say to yourself consciously, I'm not going to be like that when I grow up. or you outright rebel and try to do the opposite. But learning happens and it affects your subconsciousness. So even when you say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to be like my mom, I'm not going to do that, subconsciously you're learning a pattern from your parents or your primary caregivers if you're adopted. You're learning that from them. Subconsciously, it's going to go deep within you. So you're going to repeat what your parents did. It may not be exact, but it's going to be a repeat. I've seen this happen so many times. It's hard for people to realize that they're doing that because they don't think they are doing that. But it is possible to break that cycle. Yeah? You can unlearn that information that's in your subconscious and learn healthy living instead. That is possible. But you have to uncover that information first so you know that it's out when you deal with it. I've taught somebody in my past. Her mother and father are my age, and from the outside they seem to be a nice marriage. They seem to be okay. But I know the father, and we've been to school together, and I know this guy to be really passive. And when we were little kids, his only friend was a bully. All of us are Indians, and his only friend was a bully. And he bullied everybody. Even Indian kids didn't like this guy. He was just a bully. But this guy, that was his friend. So he always rode bikes with him and stuff like that. And so I was thinking, I bet that's what he needs, is an oppressor. So I started to wonder, now that he's grown, about his wife. The chances are really good that behavior really went deep into his subconscious. And that possibly his wife is kind of controlling. She is an oppressor, even though it may not be shouting and violence and stuff like that. It's still an oppressing element. And as a result, they had kids. The oldest daughter managed to hook up with a guy whose father was a wife batterer. And he subconsciously learned that from his father. So he started to treat this girl mean. He would get mad at her just easy, and then she would do whatever he wanted to do. And this girl was a smart girl. She was the honor student and the valedictorian of her high school class. That's way up there. This girl was university bound. She could have went to any big university in America and done really well. But she chose to be with this guy who was like a bum. No job, just drinks around all the time. And yet she had a promising future. Now why did she hook up with this guy? I think low self-esteem. She probably felt she needed something. You know, all teenagers have somebody, and she probably felt left out, so she probably felt, okay, this guy is attracted to me, so I'm going to go with him. It started out really nice, and then he started to get abusive with her. And she started to wear a lot of makeup, so you know she was hiding something. I really didn't like seeing that. So I started to think again, wow, I bet you she learned this in her home from her parents, even though on the surface her parents look like a happy couple. That underneath it, the father of this girl, the guy that I grew up with, he's kind of like a victim. And victims naturally attract oppressors. Naturally. and vice versa. So that pattern must have been in the home. And this girl, their daughter, she must have picked up on it subconsciously, because she ended up in a very abusive relationship. Her relatives would say, just leave him. Then she would say, yeah, but he's going to be really sad, or he's going to be angry, he might do something. The typical excuses of somebody who is emotionally unwell. So I was sad to see that so young, yeah, 18 and 19 years old. Then her younger sister came into the picture, and this was the girl I was teaching. The younger girl was saying, yeah, I don't know about my big sister, man. She has a no good guy and stuff like that. Then she was saying that her aunties were this way too. That's her father's sisters. She was telling me about how her aunties' men are, and that how they're really abusive, and I was like, wow, so this must go even back further. This pattern must go back to the grandparents. It's learned behavior, yeah? This is what they learn in the home, even on the subconscious level. Her aunties, who are this guy's sisters, they're all like their brother. They're all like victims, and they all attract oppressors. And they all have children. And their children are probably turning out this way too. They're either victims or they're oppressors. It can go either way. Because this is a dualistic lifestyle, so it's going to go either way, one or the other. They cannot comprehend anything in between, negative and positive, because they're dualistic. All dualistic people are that way. They cannot comprehend the idea of a third perspective. For dualistic people, it's either you're for me or you're against me. Even if it were possible that one of these people attracts a healthy person, it's still not going to work, because it's going to be too much input. It's going to be overload, even to the point of where the unhealthy party is going to make their excuses. I don't know, he's kind of boring, and because they perceive unhealthiness as exciting, and they think that's what love is. So this is what they learned in the home. So when they encounter a healthy person, they interpret that as somebody being boring. They know he's nice, they know he's friendly, but they think that there's something wrong with him, because they cannot comprehend that third perspective. And the healthy people have that third one. That's why that will mess up. They will cause it to mess up. Even on a subconscious level, they will cause the relationship to fail. Unhealthy people do that. So anyway, back to this family. So I was thinking, yeah, wow, this is crazy, yeah, how this guy's sisters seem to be this way. And the whole family seems to be this way. So I started to think, geez, the grandparents must be this way too. And it must have gone back even further. When did it start? Most likely when we were put on reservations. That's most likely when it started, when we were put on reservations. Because at that time we experienced something. Actually, we experienced several things that were quite devastating to our culture. And we lost that third perspective. As a nation, we lost that third perspective. So this is where the unhealthy patterns start, on the reservation. So, what happened during that time period? Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations They were prison camps in the beginning. And this is a situation where we couldn't leave. We were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us. And we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that. But once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it. And then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. So what we got on a reservation was bullshit food. It was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. These are the 4 parts of the self. So with the 4 parts of the self being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota star knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so it was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside they weren't. They were star knowledge people. They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down to certain people, like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. This is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikje Oyate thing. Ikje Oyate means human being. When you live this way, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. The pay was really low. So they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered, they were killed, they were raped, they were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with, because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. And remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead. So they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people, because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turned to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turned to alcohol, and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, They were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. All they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. As a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation. And because of this incident, we've become victims and oppressors. And when we have children, they learn it too. It might not even be physical. We might not even be able to see any violence, but there's still something wrong. Something is missing. So the children grow up. They learn that because that's all they see. That's all they experience in their home is an incorrect idea of what love really is. So they pick it up at home. That's what they interpret it to be love. And in unhealthy families, you're missing teachings that you should receive, that every human should receive to develop emotionally. So when we follow an ideology that is also dualistic, that keeps us in an unhealthy way. And we totally cannot comprehend a third perspective. So that is a cycle of abuse. And that's been continuing since then. And it's getting worse. With each generation coming, we become more dualistic. It's just getting worse. So this is the reason why most relationships on the reservation are unhealthy. Even when they think they're happy, there's still something missing. Getting back to my story here, this girl that I was teaching, like I said, her father and mother, on the surface, they seem to be a really nice couple. But underneath, obviously, there was something not right. There was no physical violence, but unhealthy living doesn't have to be physically violent. An abusive relationship does not have to include physical violence. An abusive relationship can also be emotionally abusive. And that doesn't mean making people feel angry or sad. That doesn't mean that. It means lack of emotional development. That when something goes wrong, they're afraid to discuss it. And as a result, all that emotion gets trapped inside of them and it never really comes to peace. And they just try to forget about it by doing something nice. But that doesn't work because the energy is still there. And they try to wish it away. They deny it. They go into emotional denial. This is also an abusive relationship. And it's also a person being abusive to themselves, too. When you're in emotional denial, you're abusive to yourself. If you're abusive to yourself, you are naturally abusive to others in your communication. Abuse doesn't always mean to hit somebody or slam somebody around or cuss somebody out. And it doesn't just mean that. It means all kinds of things. And I think once we learn about that, that's knowledge. It can help us. Doesn't mean we have to stay that way. We can learn it and find the solution and get out of it. We can learn a healthy way to live. So anyway, like I said, looking at this girl's family and I see that her father, his brothers and sisters are all this way too, then I thought the grandparents must be this way, and then the great-grandparents must also be this way. Now that's going to take us around the time of putting us on the reservation. So my guess is that it wasn't always this way, but it began when we were placed on reservations. That's when it was really forced in. So this girl that I was teaching, she would tell me these things and was saying, yeah, I'm not going to do what my aunties and my sister, they're doing. Geez, they really have no good boyfriends. She's going on that. So I said, good for you. So I would try to talk to her about how that works concerning relationships. I wanted her to have the knowledge. Now, it would be up to her to apply that. if she wants to believe me, accept this knowledge or not. Is she going to apply it? Because I'm trying to give her a foundation because I know she's not receiving it at home. And I'm not trying to say her parents are bad. I'm just saying they're most likely incapable because they probably don't know this information. And it's coming from our ancestors. So I wanted her to know this information, at least know about it. She seemed to be real cool with it. And then my last year of teaching at that school, she found a boyfriend. And I don't know where he was staying because he was not from that area. He came from North Dakota. So I was wondering, how is he staying in our little town? There's no new family moved into the community. So my mother just asking a third party, who is that guy? Where is he from? That's all she said. And then the information came back, and it turned out this girl that I was teaching, she met this guy at a powwow and then asked her parents if he could live with them. Evidently, his family said it would be okay, that he could go to school there. And I was like, oh my, that reservation in North Dakota is quite a distance from where we're from. And his family is letting him go? This guy is still, a young teenager. He's not even legally an adult yet. And his family is allowing him to live with his girlfriend's family? I think something is not right here. I didn't say anything though. I mean, they were a couple throughout high school, and the guy seemed to be, he always was her brothers, but other than that, he didn't really hang with anybody. He was always with this girl. And I started to think, you know what? There's something not right about this. I just got that vibe. And I don't know what happened, but that's when I moved to Germany. And so I was thinking, who initiated this relationship? Some years went by. I read in the online newspaper, I saw a headline of a police record. Lo and behold, I saw the name of my former student's boyfriend. He was arrested for raping a woman who was passed out, and he was heading for prison. So even though I said all this information to this girl about what love is, what is a healthy relationship, what is an unhealthy relationship, I talked my face blue to this girl, trying to save her, trying to get her into a healthy way of living. And what does she do? She ends up with a guy. She wants him to live with her, even though they were both like 15 years old. 15 years old. Oh, no, wait, he was 17, but he flunked twice. So here she's an honor student. Yeah? She's an honor student, and he's like 17 years old, and he's in the same grade as her, and he's failing all his classes. It seems like this is the way it is. They're smart kids, but they want to be with really dumb people and abusive people. And it's like, how do you break that? They have to break it themselves. They have to come out of it themselves. That's what I realized. They have to hit rock bottom. They are so strong in their addiction to their idea of love that they can't see clarity. And when clarity is staring them in the face and saying, this is what healthy living is like, they cannot comprehend it because they're dualistic. They cannot comprehend healthy living because they can't communicate like that. They are unable to comprehend healthiness because they are dualistic. Lakota Star Knowledge says there's at least 3 perspectives to every situation. Dualistic people choose one and say that's good and reject the other 2 and call it bad. So they see it in 2 components. Yeah, one being good, the other 2 being bad. Divide that by 3. The good part represents 33%, and what they say is the bad part is 67%. They reject at least 67% of reality. So when I'm standing there talking my face blue to this girl about what healthy love is, she's incapable of comprehending it. And she might agree with it and say, yes, that sounds good, but she can't comprehend it. Comprehension means it sinks in. It sinks in, so she has total understanding. Dualistic people are not capable of doing that until they get rid of their dualism, until they add something to it so it's not dualism anymore. And when they come to peace with themselves, until that happens, they cannot comprehend it. It's really sad to see that because, yes, she's got several kids from this guy, and all she does is talk shit about this guy. That's all she does. She's still in the relationship. The relationship is still there. She's on the other side of the coin. See, in duality, when people enter relationships, remember I said they don't want to walk through that doorway. They want to stay always happy. They don't want to learn from difficulty because they say that's bad. That's not good. So they always try to force themselves to be happy. They're always trying to force themselves in their best behavior, to act in their best behavior all the time. They don't want the other one to be angry, sad, or scared. They want to only please that person to always make them happy. This is leading to the addiction. It's like a drug. Always taking a drug to feel a certain way. That's the same thing that's happening. That's why it's called addiction. They're becoming addicted to it. That's how it is for unhealthy people. And so when they enter that relationship, they only stay on that side. They force themselves to. And when it fails, and it will fail, then they go on the other side. But they're still in the relationship. But this time, they hate. They wake up in the morning and the first thing they think to themselves is, I hate that SOB. That SOB is a dumb SOB. He's stinky. He's a shit. He's stupid. He's retarded. He's an asshole. And like, wait a minute. That's the guy you wanted to live with you. Do you see what I mean? They're still in a relationship. They live the whole day long hating that person. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're still putting that person first in your life. You're taking all this time to think of that person all day long and then hate him. That means you're still in a relationship. It's unhealthy. You're still in an unhealthy, abusive relationship. So that's what she's going through. And over a year, she's been this way. And most likely, she will remain this way until she enters her next unhealthy relationship. And people who are unhealthy like this, they'll say, my mom told me to always be considerate to the less fortunate. That's why it doesn't bother me that my ex is with so-and-so. That's that hatred side of the relationship. They're still in their relationship. They're still in that relationship. They're not out, even though they're with another guy. they're still in that other relationship too because they can't stop talking about them.
To read more about Lakota Star Knowledge Spirituality, you can read my book called Wichocha Otechike. You can see the book cover on the right side of this screen. This book contains the information to what I talk about on my Lakota spirituality videos. To purchase this book, please click below where it says Show More. Clicking on that link will open up the description below, and there you will see a link called To Purchase My Books. As you will see, it's an eBay link. Click on that eBay link, and there you will see the information to get this book. Lila Pila Mayelo. Thank you very much.